The world likes to focus on how big China is, especially the growth of the middle class here and how much spending power they really have. And there's a lot of debate over whether or not China should continue to be considered a developing nation when they have so much wealth, so much aggregated wealth. And yeah, it's true. If you come to China, you're probably going to go to one of the big cities, Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and you're going to look around and you see, my God, this place is developed. I mean, there's money everywhere. Even in my small town here, and I say small, it's 3.5 million people, but even if you drive around this city, you'll look around and go, my God, there's a lot of money here. And there is. But people forget how big this country really is. And I've said this before, you really have no idea what you're talking about until you see it with your own eyes. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rojo Reads the News. I'm your host, Paul. Today I have an article that comes from Expat Focus. It was originated from Caixin. It maybe put things into perspective a little bit about how diverse and how gigantic this economy in China really is. China has 600 million people with monthly income less than $141. 600 million people. That's insane. Now, $141 goes a lot further in China than it would in most other countries, but still, it just gives you an idea how big this country is. There are still some 600 million people whose monthly income is barely 1,000 yuan, or $141 in China. Li's remarks sparked heated discussion, with many doubting whether China really has so many people living on such low incomes. The premier's words are true. After analyzing a random sample of 70,000 families collected by the National Bureau of Statistics, our team at the China Institute for Income Distribution at Beijing Normal University found that nearly 42.9% of the people in the sample had a household monthly income per person of no more than 1,090 yuan in 2019. Wow. How large is China's low-income population? This is a great graph here. Kind of shows you population on the right, proportion on the left. If that statistic holds true nationwide, it would account for more than 599.9 million people, or about 600 million people. Although China's rapid economic growth in recent decades has propelled many people into high-income brackets, we mustn't ignore the fact that the majority of the population fall into the low or middle-income groups. And middle-income groups in China, by the way, is not the same as it is in the West. The middle class here, yes, they have a lot of spending power, but it's all relative to the country that they live in. Many of them are still living on or near the breadline. They mostly remain out of sight and have few channels to make their voices heard. In that sense, they are society's silent majority. That is also true. I mean, here in the big cities, you don't see them. There's some migrant workers, construction workers, and things like this, and they live in makeshift dormitories on the construction sites. You really need to get off the highways and off the high-speed rails and into the countryside to see just how many people there are in this country. It goes on and on and on, and the vast majority of these folks are not wealthy people. It's very, very poor. And even in the big cities or between the big cities, there are pockets of these communities that you accidentally will wander into, and you see what life is like for the majority of the people here. The income we talk about here is disposable income, not average salaries. Disposable income is the money left over after paying income tax, social security premiums, and other essential fees. It reflects real individual and household livelihoods, and so is globally seen as one of the most important figures to judge a country's development. Who are the 600 million people Li spoke of? The survey showed that 75.6% of them live in rural areas, while 36.2% and 34.8% live in less developed central or western China, respectively. They generally receive an average of about 9 years of schooling, enough to finish middle school, but not to progress beyond that. Low-income families support more elderly relatives and children than higher-income families. That is also true. That's part of the culture here. Nearly 39% of the 600 million are either older than 60 or younger than 16, a higher proportion than the equivalent for higher-income groups. Some foreign politicians have claimed that China is no longer a developing country and should be treated as a developed nation. Their words confound some people's minds in China who make a misjudgment that China has become a high-income country or will become one soon. I have mixed feelings about this because it is so big. I think that both terms can be true at the same time. China really is its own monster. It's got such a huge middle class, roughly the size of the entire American population. Very, very wealthy people on top. And the middle class and the wealthy have an aggregated wealth that is enormous. But then you have the 600 million, or 40% of the population, that are very poor and still struggling every day to make life work. Both situations are happening at the same time. So to determine, is China a developing country? Is it a developed country? Right now, I have to say it is both. China has an annual disposable income per capita of 30,000 yuan last year. Americans, meanwhile, earned more than 10 times that figure. The gap shows that China is still a typical developing country dominated by a low-income population. The pattern of income distribution in China is still far away from the classic olive shape, which has a large middle class and a short gap between rich and poor. We have to remain clear-headed about how much Chinese people really earn and where China stands globally. Our status as the world's largest developing country will not change for now. So this is a very heated debate in the world. Is China developed? Is it not developing? Again, I think both can be true at the same time. What makes it difficult is the numbers, the enormous amount of people who live here. It's very difficult to compare it with other developed nations, especially throughout Europe, which have such small populations. But I will say, when you drive into the countryside and you drive in parts of central and western China, and you see what life is like for these folks, it's really hard to say. When you segment the population into groups, it's very easy to see that China still has a long way to go. What do you think? Comment below, let me know.